Welcome back to CQ, the AWS Certification Quiz Show, with myself, MJ Scott, and today's special guest, Ashmeet Kalra. Ash, it's so good to have you back. Some of you might remember Ash from our Sydney Summit episodes. She's back today with me and Skippy to do a full feature episode. Ash, tell us a bit about what you do here at AWS for those of you who didn't see you at Sydney Summit.
Sure. Hi everyone. Good morning. I'm Ashmeet Kalra. I'm a solutions architect with AWS. I'm looking after digital native customers in New South Wales and just enjoying my time working with customers in the digital segment.
Awesome. Ash, since Sydney Summit, what have you been working on? What are some of the buzzwords, some of the buzz products or services coming out?
It's been exciting. It's been super busy, and based on the number of sessions we have had in Sydney Summit, we are engaging a lot with our customers to go deeper into some of the services we shared. So it's exciting times ahead, lots of work and opportunities, and lots of creative and innovative stuff for our customers to look forward to. Exciting
times, Ash, and here you are back on CQ with me.
Absolutely.
All right, so what are we looking at today? Today we're looking at the Certified Solutions Architect Associate Level exam, so building up some good content for you all online on that exam. Please remember, book is the official study guide from webex.com, also available on amazon.com. Ash, are you ready to get started on some questions today?
Yeah, I do have questions with me. Yep.
It's good. It's going to be a bit different to what we were talking about at Sydney Summit. I am super glad we're not talking about machine learning this time because it was very much over my head. Let's see how you go with a bit of architecting, shall we?
Sure.
Awesome. Question 1. Security groups. Ready?
Sure.
An Amazon VPC security group can be associated with. And for this question, Ash, I'm looking for one answer only.
Okay. So, as you all know, security is #1 priority for all of us in AWS, and we are working that very extensively with all of our customers. So if you look at security group, a security group is basically a mechanism for us to manage the traffic in and out of our instances. Now, if you look at these options, you have 4 to look at. Amazon EC2 instance, Elastic Network Interface, Amazon VPC subnet, and Elastic IP address. Now, consider the aspect that when we talk security groups, we actually talk about instance level security. So it's like an instance level virtual firewall.
Okay. So number 1 kind of jumps out straight away, Ash.
Number 1 jumps out, but let me cover other options so that we can have our viewers understanding of what the other aspects are.
Awesome.
So if you look at option number 3, which is a VPC subnet, now we have another security mechanism called as Network Access Control Lists, or in short, we sometimes call them NACLs, not the knuckling, but the NACLs. Yeah, and so at the VPC subnet level, you have Network Access Control Lists, which act as your virtual firewall. So hence, security groups are not associated at the subnet level. So all of a sudden, I'll discard this option number 3.
Cool.
Elastic IP address is associated with an instance. It's an IP address associated to an instance, but it doesn't directly correlate to a security group or providing security mechanism. So I'll discard that option as well. Now I have 2 options with me: EC2 instance and Elastic Network Interface.
Okay.
Wherever you look at definitions about security groups, they are stateful in nature, and you will always look at instance level security. But when you go deeper into the mechanics and understand how we configure an EC2 instance, there is a concept of Elastic Network Interface.
Okay.
Now, Elastic Network Interface is more about a virtual network card associated, or a logical networking component associated to your EC2 instance.
So a bit like a computer with multiple network cards.
Yeah.
Ash.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and by default, with an EC2 instance, we have a default Elastic Network Interface, or ENI, associated, which is H0.
Okay.
And when you create security groups within AWS, actually you link or associate your security groups at the ENI level.
Okay.
So even though they are instance level security, but read the question, the word is associated with. So the associated with means that it's actually at the configuration level linked to an Elastic Network Interface, although it gives you an instance level security. Tricky question. Read the options carefully.
I love it.
And answer number 2.
You're going with number 2. So this is the perfect time for me to remind everyone online, please vote along with us. We do have our poll running in the background. So let's get you prepped for your next cert. Ash is going for number 2. We have 100% gone for 2 on the poll.
Perfect.
So everyone agrees with you, Ash.
Cool.
2 it is.
Perfect.
Feeling uncomfortable?
I am.
Bit different, right?
I know. It's very different than Summit, I tell you.
It was quite stressful, so, but also heaps of fun.
And not many cameras.
Much easier in our little studio,
I
right,
know,
Ash?
I know.
Good. Let's move on to question 2, a bit of workload management.
Okay.
All right. You have configured an AWS Lambda function to launch an Amazon EC2 Linux instance each Sunday night to run a 30-minute batch job. Okay. What would be the most reliable way to terminate the instance after it has completed the batch job? And once again, this question requires one answer only.
Okay. Now, for all the people who are watching me, always remember that when you get scenario-based question or a use case where you want to look at, always try to look at the options, read the options carefully, and try to understand which one is most compatible with the question being asked. You know, sometimes it gives you a way of kind of removing the options which definitely don't make any sense to the question being asked.
Okay.
So always look at the right question and the answers.
So this might be a good job to bring up our exam tip of the week. Ash, what do you think?
Awesome.
Ash's top tip of the week for taking your next certification. Can you just repeat your tip?
So my tip is basically look through the question, especially scenario-based questions. Try to look at all the options and separate out the ones which are not the correct ones, and focus more on the closer matching option.
Perfect. So what you're saying is AWS doesn't mind being a bit tricky with our questions,
Exactly.
and there might be some inaccuracies that you can immediately eliminate.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Coming back to the question. So if you read the question carefully, the question talks about configuring a Lambda function to launch an EC2 instance every Sunday night to run a 30-minute batch job. And the expectation is that we should be able to reliably terminate the instance after it has completed the batch job.
Yep.
Okay. Now, if you look at the options, let's go one by one and see which one is feasible. Now, if I start from the bottom.
And I see a problem there straight away.
Yeah,
right,
it's a Lambda function, and Lambda function to wait for 30 minutes and then do a function to terminate the instance doesn't make sense, because by default, how Lambda is architected, you have a default timeout of 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you would just get an idea, well, Lambda will never be a solution because you would not be able to wait for 30 minutes just for a batch termination.
Perfect.
And even from an architectural point of view, Lambda and how we implement it, it's more about, a lot of event-driven architecture where we look at, event-based model to create a Lambda function. In this scenario, we are looking at a batch job trying to do a post operation. Lambda doesn't fit for purpose for this particular requirement. So I'll eliminate number 4. Now if I look at the other options, option number 3. So Amazon CloudWatch is a very important service for us, especially when we are doing monitoring and and analyzing the workload which we are processing within AWS. Now CloudWatch provides you effective metrics, like you can have some pre-built metrics, you can have custom metrics set up for your services to have a due diligence incorporated for how you are operating under AWS. And you can, using the metrics, create an alarm. But that doesn't mean that alarm will actually terminate the instance. Because it's just more about monitoring and letting you know what the metrics are when your workload is being processed in AWS. But it won't perform an action until you make an action explicitly done on a metric.
So clue is in the product name, right? It's watching, it doesn't actually perform an action.
Absolutely correct. Now, if I look at option 1 and 2, first of all, I look at, it's a batch job, so I'm going to use a batch job to be able to identify when to terminate. But if you look at AWS batch as a service, there is a very specific use case, like when you have a lot of concurrent parallel workloads with massive amounts of compute you need to process. And that's where the best benefit of AWS batch is leveraged. Not saying that you can't use batch for simple use cases or small ones, but you're over-engineering something which is very simple. And here it's the simplicity of the matter is that you just need to terminate an instance which is being running to perform a job. So although AWS batch can do, but do you actually want to use that service to do a simple half-an-hour operation once a week and with not massive parallelism incorporated? That's the question you need to ask yourself.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Yes, we can have many services doing similar stuff. There is overlap sometimes when you're architecting solutions, but you should always architect for the most optimal outcome. It's not about just doing a solution is about doing the solution, keeping all the non-functionals in mind. That's
I like it,
very
Ash.
important.
I think you just gave people another mini tip there as
Yeah,
well.
that's yeah. So when I go, the only option when I kind of looking through the question is to run an instance sudo shutdown command on the instance.
Okay.
But guys, you need to understand the EC2 lifecycle management process, and here we do have different stages. We have start, stop, terminate, and by default, the termination behavior of an EC2 instance is stop.
Okay.
But the question, guys, question talks about terminating the instance and not stopping it. So what that means is, in order for you to successfully use option number 1, you should be able to change the default behavior, shutdown behavior of your EC2 instance from stop to shutdown so that it actually terminates.
I like it. I like how you've picked apart that question and given AWS some improvements for their question as well, actually.
So please remember, when you do that, make sure your shutdown behavior is set to terminate, and then you can run the command sudo shutdown now -edge and terminate your instance.
So you're going to go with number 1?
Number 1.
With the additional information that you've provided?
Exactly.
Fantastic. So a quick check on the poll, Ash, and they actually went for batch. 100% went for batch. So can you just do a quick summary of why it's not batch in this instance?
Sure. So again, as I said, that right service for the right workload is very crucial. I'm not saying batch will not be able to do the job for you, but if you look at the question, it's just a single 30-minute batch job, and it's not massive. You don't have to incorporate a lot of parallelism in the implementation. So it's a simple mechanism of run a job, terminate an instance. Number 1 is more simpler to do and quicker to solve this particular problem. Yeah.
1 it is. Thank you so much, Ash. Let's move on to question 3. And just a reminder, please feel free, vote along online. And if you do have any questions for Ash while we have her here, please feel free to chuck them in the chat as well. All right, AMI, you ready?
Okay. AMIs.
You have an Amazon EC2 instance that was launched from a community AMI.
Okay.
You have received notice that this AMI is about to be deleted. How can you ensure that your instance will continue to run after the AMI is deleted?
Okay.
1 answer.
Okay. So you have an EC2 instance running in your environment, and it's a shared AMI. That means you are sharing an AMI from a community AMI. So, and the you get a deletion notice, or you get a termination notice of your AMI. Now, always remember one thing, guys, that AMI is independent of instance lifecycle. That's very important to understand, and please focus on understanding the whole AMI life cycles and the EC2 instance lifecycle management. Do a bit deeper understanding. We have very good, a state diagram to explain the whole concept about EC2 instance, and there are a lot of tricky questions in this exam actually talking about different EC2 instance stages. So make sure that particular state diagram is in your tips when you go for your exam. But coming back to the original question, if you look at this, when you create an instance from an AMI, that instance is independently running in your account. So whatever happens to that AMI, it's completely a mutually exclusive process. Whether you delete it, you add it, whatever you do, it is completely siloed from the actual instance. The only catch here is that with that AMI which is getting deleted, you won't be able to create more instances, but you already have an instance running in your environment. So even if that AMI gets deleted, you still have instances running. So if you look at all these options, there's always they're talking about you have to do something. So straight away you would know that, well, I have an instance running in my environment which is fully functional and I'm managing it. Why do I have to do something if an AMI gets deleted?
Fair enough.
I do have processes to do backup and restore and create snapshots as my daily backup routine process, but that's completely for my instance independent of what AMI is doing. So I look at the options like create something. In first two, I'll say I don't have to create anything because my instance is already available. So option 1 and 2 would go away.
So it's like they would work, but it's not the best.
It's not
solution.
Required. It's not something you need to do to be able to be functional. You will already be running your business, your instance would be active, and you don't have to use Amazon Data Lifecycle Manager to replicate the AMI. If you want to, you can create an AMI from your instance. You can create AMIs from your snapshots. Nobody's stopping you from doing that action, but it should not be related to when an AMI gets deleted or a shared AMI gets removed. So the only thing you have to do is do nothing. So basically, the AMI deletion will not affect your instance at all. Option number 4.
What is if we can go back to number 3, the data Lifecycle Manager, what does that actually do?
So basically, you can actually set up your, so you have your instance and then you have your AMI. So with AMIs, you can create instances, and with the instances, you can create snapshots. So it gives you a mechanism to manage the whole life cycle of your Amazon machine images.
So good for backups.
Good for backups.
Yep. All right, so locking in number 4.
Sure, yeah.
Quick check on the poll, if we can close the poll. Yeah, 100%.
Cool,
It's not going to affect. Beautiful. Let's move on to question 3. I think our producer's having a bit of a pronunciation discussion on the online chat, so we'll leave him to that and we'll continue with some RDS.
Pronunciation of what?
AMI, of course. Oh. Always. All right,
Amazon
here we go.
Machine image. Okay.
Your team is building an order processing system that will span multiple availability zones. I love these types of questions, Ash. During testing, the team wants to test how the application will react to a database failover. How can you enable this type of test?
Okay. Now, because you guys are all sitting in a solutions architect exam, one of the important non-functionals we work very heavily with our customers is reliability.
Absolutely.
And resilience of their workloads. Because, and just to go further on that, every time you are working on a workload, you look at the recovery objectives, because anything can fail, right? So how do you ensure you can recover from failure in the most efficient manner? And for that, and quickly, depending upon what your business continuity plan looks like. Okay, so for every time you're talking recovery or DR scenarios or resilience on your architecture, you have to look at the recovery objectives, your recovery point objective, your recovery time objective. So point objective is at what point when you fail, you should come back, and how much of data loss you can actually accommodate. Well, real world, you should not. You would say, I do not want to have any data loss. Even my in-flight transactions should work. But reality is that you need to understand those core metrics for any business problem in the mechanism of when you are doing recovery planning or failover planning for your customers.
Fantastic.
The other thing is the RTO, which is the time objective. How quickly you want to come back when you fail. Now, when we are architecting with our customers, especially the backend, like the RDS, as per the question, important aspect here is that they might have your system of record, the core data, which is could be hosted on RDS. So it's very important that you architect your system of record or RDS to be able to be functional in a failover condition, considering what the RTO and RPO of a customer is. Now, that's why we have this concept of availability zones where we span a component like RDS into multiple availability zones, so that if one of the instance in one of the availability zones fails, you can still continue to actually run your workload without having any issues with your business continuity. And hence, setting in Amazon RDS with multi-AZ, what that means is that you have a primary instance running on your primary AZ, and then you have a standover instance running on the secondary AZ, and you have a synchronous replication happening for your data.
Absolutely.
So what that means is that your data is replicated to another AZ. If one AZ goes down, you can still continue to process your transactions where you left off, and it's a synchronous replication, so you would have up-to-date information. Now that's about what multi-AZ.
Beautiful. So 1 + 1 waiting.
Yeah. So now if you want to do a test, now again, as an architect, it's good to architect for resilience. It's also important to do proper recovery testing and to be able to see if you're actually able to meet your recovery objectives. Now, if I look at these options, what I need to test is that I need to test a database failover. So first of all,
we can get rid of number 4 straight away,
going
off your explanation.
It's not possible.
It's just wrong.
Well, seriously. Who put that question? Who put that question? Well, we can make it possible. Even, impossible says I'm possible. So we can make it possible.
I love it.
So it is definitely possible to test failovers, and it is highly recommended to test failovers. To all the architects listening to me right now, please encourage your customers to do recovery testing. It's very important, so please don't
Architecture top tip of the week.
Exactly, don't look at option number 4 at all. It's not desirable. Number 3, create a support case asking for a failover of the instance with at least 24 hours notice. Well, do you really think that when you fail in your production environment, you have to wait for support for 24 hours to
I would hope not.
I hope not. Not even in testing environment. You should have mechanics to be able to test it in real time. So no, option number 3 straight away goes away. and in production environment, it's a strict no-no, definitely not.
Good.
Number 2, terminate the DB instance, create a new one in different AZ, update the connection string to point to the new instance.
Oh, a lot of words going on there.
Yeah, interesting. But again, if you look at the question, your team is actually processing an order processing system across multiple AZs. So the expectation is the Amazon RDS should have multi-AZ turned on, which means you should already have a standby instance running in your secondary AZ, so you don't have to create a new one, and that instance should already be replicating synchronously your data. So, and it should seamlessly be able to go from primary to standby. That's why that we talk about automatic failovers with RDS. So definitely you don't have to do a lot of steps by creating a new one and kind of reconfigure the connection strings. So straight away, if you reboot your primary instance, the expectation is for a multi-AZ Amazon RDS that the secondary one will kick off and you can do your recovery testing.
Perfect.
So option 1 is
locking
the
in one.
right answer.
And on the line, we did have someone go for number 2, but I like to think they're just testing you, Ash, making sure we've got the passion there.
Okay.
1 it is.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Ash. Let's move on to question 5.
Cool.
Route 53.
Wow.
All over the place today.
Yeah.
So, which DNS records are commonly used to stop email spoofing and spam?
Okay. So as you all must be knowing, this is the basics of AWS, but Route 53 is our managed DNS service, highly reliable and available. If you look at the options, these are all the attributes you have in Route 53. A records and C names are basically used for your resolving the IP processes, so it has no direct relation with email spoofing and spamming. If I look at option 1 and 2, option 1, which is mail exchange, and option 2, which is sender policy framework.
Oh, I'm so glad you knew that. I was racking my brain for what it stood for, actually.
I always have to remind myself of all the acronyms ever, and AWS always overwhelms me with lots of acronyms. I still remember my day 1. I had to go through the glossary, and I was making a separate list for all the abbreviations I'm hearing across the services, but it's always good to
And now they just roll off the tongue.
We just learn. We keep learning. That's
so
the thing.
Sender policy framework. Got it.
No. SPF, whatever. SPF.
It works so well for this question. Spoofing, spam, SPF.
I know. So you know the fun part is SPF means spoof and spoof means. I actually don't want to say that. I want to be a bit serious about it. But
no, we're not.
but sender policy framework actually provides you that rules in which you can define what kind of emails are acceptable within your network. So that's where you can configure that in your Route 53. So SPF is the right answer.
And can you quickly go through A records and C names just for viewers online, Ash?
So A records and C names, basically when you are creating, the DNS is basically the resolving of your IP addresses. So A record is basically that mapping, that root level mapping of the IP with the DNS, and C names could map to an IP or another C name. Basically, it's a canonical name towards, you remember now? Yeah. So it's a canonical name towards mapping to your A records, and it's very applicable when you are building up architectures where you have APIs routing to multiple directions based on different use cases and scenarios.
So we're locking in number 2?
Number 2 is matching with the
75%.
Cool.
So we had a couple of people go for mail exchange.
No, okay.
SPF it is.
SPF, spoof.
Awesome, nice easy one for us.
That was an easy one. You can directly find that in your documentation about Cloud, Route 53 and what all these attributes mean.
Beautiful, and we'll get our producer to put that link on the online chat for you all as well.
Absolutely.
All right, question number 6, monitoring. Your company's IT management team is looking for an online tool to provide recommendations to save money, improve system availability and performance, and to help close security gaps. What tool can help the management team?
Okay.
It's a great question, very common in not just architecting, but also in our cloud practitioner exam as
well. It's also, you get a lot of questions in the DevOps associate as well related to monitoring, especially because, a lot of DevOps operations are based on creating all these business metrics, and then you have to look at all the different services available.
A lot to digest,
So, monitoring is something, once you kind of digest these services, they are going to be working well for your cloud practitioner, SA associate, your DevOps exams as well. So it's a good topic to kind of get yourself well versed with.
Awesome.
Now, looking at this question, always remember that every service we have in the monitoring and performance, it's very important because it gives you a mechanism as a person using AWS to identify, are you actually using your workload in the most effective manner in terms of performance metrics you have or the benchmarking you have done for your workload. It's very important for your performance testing, for your overall execution of your workload in production environments. So always make sure you have proper logging, auditing enabled with monitoring. And monitoring is not just about monitoring the metrics, but also identifying some of the important attributes or outcomes of a metric, and then generate notifications or patterns or responses so that you can actually action them proactively rather than getting something notified later when it becomes a major impact. So proactive monitoring is important, and hence these services which we are looking at, these options are really useful under different aspects, right? So now when you look at this question, the question is mainly talking about how do I get recommendations to save money? How do I get recommendations about my system availability, performance, and close security gaps? Now let's go through what all these services do, and then you would directly be able to map out which matches which.
So hopefully we'll get 100% on the poll.
Hopefully. So if you look at number one, CloudWatch. CloudWatch is a service which is, again, as the name says, it watches over what you're doing in the cloud, which means that it provides you the metrics in terms of what workload you're processing. Your default metrics on the service level and your custom metrics are actually kind of provided there, and you can set up detailed monitoring if you want to go really deeper into granular level of details of what your workload is actually processing on. Very good tool for investigation and debugging and looking at what is going on in your workload. Then you have Trusted Advisor, which is like a tool which you can, or a service or a tool, whatever you want to call it, or a self-service mechanism for you to actually look at your account and see where you stand in terms of different non-functionals like your security, your reliability, your cost. So it scans over your account and gives you recommendations. So it looks at things like, oh, MFA is not enabled in your account in security, or you're not rotating your credentials correctly, things like that, or you're not backing up some of your EC2 instances, or your EBS volumes, or you're not, or there is a load balancer with no instance associated, and you have this idle state run, things like that. You get a view of different perspectives: security view, a reliability view, a cost view, that you are not terminating instances which you're not even using a lot of time. So things like that, which sometimes we try to be proactive in building due diligence in our accounts, due operations to ensure we are consistent, but we still need to have constant monitoring enabled, and not just somebody sitting and monitoring each and every log file. It's a very tedious process. So Trusted Advisor is a single placeholder where you get all these recommendations which you can further work on. And the
pretty
next
much covered everything in our scenario as well.
Exactly. Yeah, so I think the people should be able to answer it. But I would.
But let's check 3 and 4.
So config is a very important service. I encourage my customers to use this service a lot because it is a very good service in terms of managing and monitoring the configuration for your AWS resources. You can set up config rules to ensure that your configuration is well managed by the right people and by the right processes. So, and AWS config works hand in hand with configuration recorder. So configuration recorder is basically you want to record the config you want to entail for your resources. So configuration recorder is not a separate service per se, but it's like within AWS config you can have a configuration recorder to record a particular configuration of your resource. So it's more about it's more about managing configurations and not to do with system availability or saving money or performance. So I would go forward with option number 2, which is a dashboard where you can get a view of your cost and security and other recommendations.
Good way to put it, the dashboard. Getting a few questions online that I might just put to you. I think our producers got it covered, but this is what this question's making people think about, Ash. So where can you set alerts on AWS to notify you on if you're approaching your limits, your business is set allotted for different AWS services? So perfect, I think we've covered that. Thank you, Skull Crusher, welcome back as well. Wondering where you can set limits, same person, to get these notifications. So I think we've covered all that.
Yeah, we've covered that.
Which is fantastic. Budgets, where could you also use the budgets?
So budgets are basically managing your cost,
Yeah.
and then you can actually associate a particular budget for your account, and then you can set up alerts on top of. If you go beyond that, then you get an alert and you can manage your accounts. And think you have other services like Service Catalog, where you can actually manage the services you can procure for your accounts, and then you have IAM policies which you can implement to manage resources basically. So it's like you can use IAM with Service Catalog with AWS config to do proper management of your resources.
Perfect. I think this question allows for a lot of information, so thank you very much, Ash. Shall we check online? 100% gone with number 2.
Perfect.
So I assume your explanation was spot on. Number 2 it is.
Perfect.
Ash, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you back with me.
Thank you.
Everyone, please tune in same time next week. We will be looking at the SysOps Associate Level exam. For now, thank you for joining us. See you again next time.
Thank you, everyone.